Thank you. Honoured actually to be invited. Really nice, like small community here, so we can have a really close discussion between us here. Oh, brilliant. Hopefully next time we'll have 2,500. Excellent. So I just want to introduce myself. Ashraf Aboukass. I currently work for Schroders. I'm the Global Head of Security Architecture, Engineering and Operations. Previously used to work for BAE Systems as a cybersecurity consultant. I've been engaged in projects such as Swift penetration testing program review. That was post the Bangladeshi bank heist, so I reviewed their penetration testing program. I was also parachuted into TalkTalk when they were hacked, and we spent 6 months reviewing post breach. So I've got loads of experience in that field of real incidents and the aftermath and how difficult it can be. So hopefully you're going to enjoy this presentation. There's about 42 slides. We have about 50 minutes. I'm actually happy for you guys to interrupt, but because we have 42 slides, if we can keep it to like one question per slide, otherwise I probably won't get through the material. So it's a very high level overview of running a penetration testing program. Yeah, it's I try not to go into too much technical detail, but if you want some more technical detail, please ask me and I can give a response. Okay, so let me, where's your pointer here? Cool. So, just to set some expectations here, I mean, this is not about pen testing tools or a kill chain or how to be a pen tester or who's the best vendor, etc., etc. It's an overview of penetration testing, but I do touch on some other topics as well. Okay. So I've broken it down into 9 sections. What is pen testing essentially? A bit about bug bounty, how to do your target selection. That's essentially, we'll go through that in a minute. Vendor selection, scoping, preparation, execution, results and remediation. So I wanted to give you just an overview of all those areas because essentially if you're going to run a penetration testing program, you're going to have to think about those areas actually and more. So, but very high level again, because quite a few areas there. So, let's start. Pen testing. Overview. Okay, so penetration testing is essentially a validation, hopefully, of what you already know and something that you don't know. I mean, that's, in a nutshell, those are the 2 things that you're looking to get, right? You want to make sure that your security controls that you thought were in place are actually in place, so you get that insurance from an external pen tester. And you also have that independent validation that you probably wouldn't get if you had an internal tester. And you benefit from a wisdom of a security tester. So in a nutshell, that's what you get from pen testing, right? So, but please be careful, right? And just take note here. This is a snapshot. This is a point-in-time security assessment. So don't fall in that trap where you have this false sense of security that you've passed a pen test with flying colors and that your service is hack-proof. Doesn't really work like that, okay? So you know the known unknowns are coming tomorrow. There will be zero-day exploits. There will be new vulnerabilities. There will be new attack methods, everything else that goes with it. So you have a really good assurance of the present moment, that security state of that system. So that's really, really important to point out. And with any pen test, be ready to maybe break a few things and fix a lot of things. Yeah. So you need a lot of capacity to be ready to do quite a bit of remediation. Okay. So I'm going to split this up into like the type of tests that you can do in a penetration test. So you can do a service focused. Now I'm going to say service is an application as a system. So I'm just going to keep using the word service, right? So you can have an application-focused or service-focused pen test. So let's say you want to test a web application. That's all you're testing. You're testing the web application inside out, outside in. You're testing all the controls, authentication, authorization. You're testing the code, the APIs, etc. That's one. And that's in-depth in that single application. So you wouldn't be testing the hardware, the infrastructure, the network controls. You'd just be testing that application. So you get a lot of depth, but hardly any breadth. When you do a red team versus blue team, you're essentially putting them against each other, okay? And you don't really have much depth. It's really about breadth. So the guys are going to find blocks, and they're going to try and find the least path for resistance, and they'll keep going around, try and go around the blue team. The blue team will try and close the doors. So you don't get much depth in that type of test. Scenario-driven is probably the best, and that also includes purple team, which is blue and red working together. Is that you give them a goal. So you give your pen testers a goal. You say to them, hey, I want you to find this flag in this file store. I want you to make a payment through this payment system. I want you to crack this user's password, and I want you to get domain admin privileges. So that is, you have to do a lot to do that, right? And typically, that's more of a black box, okay? So there's different testing approaches. So I wanted to cover the two different types. But again, black box, you share very little information, get ready to spend a lot of money, needless to say, because you're not sharing anything. And I think that's a pretty bad idea, because time is everything, and given enough time, the pen tester, an adversary, a hacker, will find the things that take a long time to find. So there's no such thing as security by obscurity. So I tend to not do black box. I prefer to do grey box and white box testing, because you get more value out of it. Grey box, you share a little bit, okay? You have a high-level architectural overview, components, some addresses, external stuff. You might not share any internal components. You might just say external, but you have a good overview. White box, actually for me, it's clear box. You give them everything, okay? Because there's no such thing as security by obscurity, and you also are limited probably by budget, give them everything they need to know. Tell them how it's designed, even share the source code, okay? Let them do a source code review. Tell them absolutely everything, because you want them to focus on the really interesting things. You want them to get creative. Otherwise, they might just show you things that you already know about, you've already risk accepted, etc. So give them everything they need to know, so they can target stuff that you maybe not seen, not understood. So yeah, white box, I definitely go down the route of white box. You save a lot of money as well if you go down the white box route. Yes?
Do you start by creating a test plan for any of those three? And in such case, what would be your baseline? Or what information do you expect to receive from security manager, site manager, or
Sorry, are you saying are you talking about the scope?
yeah. I come from an IT background.
Yes.
I'm familiar with integration testing,
Yes.
user acceptance testing, system testing.
SOAP testing, load testing.
I know very little about
Okay.
penetration testing. So as a penetration testing, when you walk on a site, what information do you expect to get from the site manager?
Oh, okay. So that's going to kind of come up in a few slides.
Is your baseline?
Sure. So the question is, what is the baseline? What information do you expect to get? I will cover that in the next few slides under scope. Okay. So there's also the question that people ask is, should you hire an internal pen tester? I mean, is it worth it? There's just a few points here. They're very hard to find, okay? And the good ones are not that cheap when you do actually find them. And it's very hard to retain them as well. It's actually a lonely job for one person, because you can't bounce ideas on one another. So you need probably 2 or 3, and they can get creative and bounce ideas off each other. And the worst thing is, even if you have an internal pen tester, they can quite easily get outranked by the CIO, because typically they've been paid by the CIO or CTO, and they're actually marking their boss's homework. So it's a tough one. So a good idea, if you're not under the CIO, CTO, maybe you're under risk, maybe you're under finance, probably more effective. And you actually still need an external pen test for that external validation. So great if you can get one, if you have the budget. But I mean, I'm undecided if you get too much value out of having your own internal pen tester. Having said that, most of your security guys that work in your information security department, they should be security engineers and do a number of internal tests, which I'll talk about anyway. So, and now there's a lot of hype about automated pen testing, scripted pen testing, machine learning powered penetration testing. I've done a few presentations about this. And it's getting there, right? You can use a number of tools. They'll give you some, they'll catch the lowest hanging fruit for you. And it's a good way to prepare for your pen test, but it's not going to replace that wisdom of a human attacker, right? Also, with these tools, there is definitely an opportunity to raise a P1, okay, to break things. And that's not good, and that does happen. People go out and use these pen testing tools and break some services and cause an outage, and that's happened in the past, not once, not twice, from experience. So be careful with these tools. Typically open source, and you probably spend hours and hours and days getting them to work, and then they stop working when one thing changes, and so it's very fiddly. Again, you turn into an internal pen tester if you actually use them. So what about having a dedicated pen test project manager, right? Who's going to actually run the pen test for you? So typically, we carry them out by consultants, right? So there's a security consultant that does the review of the project, okay? And he would wear the hat as the pen test PM. Alternatively, you can get the pen test vendor to provide a pen test PM, but that's harder because you haven't got any inside knowledge of the organization. It's pretty hard. So somebody has to wear the hat as a pen test PM to do the coordination, right? And if you want somebody dedicated, I toyed with this idea, but I think it's around about 10 pen tests per quarter to be able to justify a dedicated person to run your pen tests. So if you're running around about 40 pen tests a year, you probably do want to get one person to actually schedule those and do all the logistics involved, et cetera, because it's quite a heavy job. It's not, you just don't get a pen tester and you land them in the organization, and then they do the test, and then they leave. It's as you'll see, there's more to it than that. But if you do get one and you want to get one, you've got to get somebody who's got very good soft skills, good project management skills, a broad technical skill set, and some good business acumen, and somebody who's very level-headed, that doesn't panic, because there'll be stuff that they find, and you don't want to scare the organization, right? Because you could quite easily do that with some of the findings you're going to be involved in some serious findings, and you've got to deliver the message properly accordingly. So I'll touch on bug bounty because that's something that more and more people are doing these days. And for me, bug bounty is great if you have a number of external public-facing services. You really are just essentially, your business has a whole load of web services that are externally facing. And you really do need that assurance that none of your services can be hacked, or you're getting a lot of clicks, site visits, etc. It's really, really important that you get you need a large number of testers, okay, to really get at all of those vulnerabilities. Okay, you're not, if you're Google or Azure or whoever they are, the big tech companies, you need thousands and thousands of people testing all your thousands of services. So you're not going to get that by hiring a pen test company. You're going to cast the net very wide and go into a bug bounty program and get thousands of people having a go. You're essentially incentivize them to hack you, but hopefully they're white hats and they're going to get paid. And it provides an opportunity for responsible disclosure. So your service is public anyway, and it can be hacked anyway. So you're given an opportunity to hack it and tell you so that you can pay them and so that you can fix it and both people win. That's the idea, okay? And it's actually the closest to the reality of what happens in the real world. So you'll get good coverage there. But again, if you're going to do this, I would, if you want to start to do this, I would run a private program as opposed to a public program. So you speak to the bug bounty vendor and you say, hey, select for me, 20 pen testers, please, or 50 pen testers. I want them all to be from the UK. I want them to all be ninjas, and they all should know, JavaScript, et cetera, and you will limit the scope, and then you'll give them 30 days to try their luck out, and then you say, here's my budget is 20,000. So what typically happens in the bug bounty is that you'll get the ninjas that say, if it's like 500 quid and I'm not going to bother, but if you put in 20 grand out there for me, then I'll go for it and give it a go. So this isn't about bug bounty, but it's an interesting model. But what you should consider is that it doesn't work for internal assets, because essentially what you're doing is you're exposing your internal network to external pen testers, and a lot of them. It's okay if you expose your internal system to 1 or 2, 3 pen testers from a vendor, but when you're exposing your internal assets to hundreds of testers, it's not really a good idea. It's also not a good idea if you don't have the resource and the maturity, you don't have a large information security team, to actually deal with the findings, because there will be a lot of findings. And once you know, you've opened a can of worms, and you have to do something with those findings, right? So especially if you're audited and you're regulated, you need to show that someone's told you that you've got a vulnerability and you've done something about it. You also want to make sure if you do this, be clear on the scope. Be clear on what you're going to pay for. Are you going to pay for cross-site scripting? Are you going to pay for SQL injection? Should you have SQL injection? You've got to be clear, because people can find those all day long. And because you've got different testers, everybody's methodology would differ. So with a vendor, they will tell you that we follow this methodology, but when you have 100 testers, they'll follow different methodologies. So sometimes it's hard to figure out how they did this, why, etc. Ultimately, the board is still not keen on the idea of inviting white hats to hack you and giving them a go in your external services, even though black hats and everybody else out there is doing it anyway and not getting paid for it. So that's an argument you want to have at senior level. So talk a bit about your target selection. So this is the depends answer, right? So what you want to do here, I think it might be in this order, it might not be, but in my opinion, you want to attack your public-facing assets, right? Websites, APIs, mobile applications, back-end services. But that's not the only thing that you should be targeting, right? Because you always assume essentially compromise in anybody's network. We should always assume that there is an adversary in there. That doesn't mean you've been breached. Let's just be clear on that. Just because you've assumed compromise doesn't mean you've been breached, okay? That's very important. An incident is not a breach. So if somebody manages to compromise a user's account because you don't have MFA and they put their password in a social media account and they've used that password to get into something on-prem, not really breached. Your account has been compromised, but then no data has been taken. So even if they are in your network and they're roaming around and they've not been able to take anything and do anything, you can argue that you're not being breached. Okay, so just be wary of that. But you should make a risk-based decision on what you test, and that's ultimately down to your risk team. So you can take the approach that you pen test what makes you money. That could definitely be a load of internal assets. Okay, your crown jewels. You can basically look at wherever your sensitive data sits and those applications have access to them, you can target those, right? You say, that's what I want to test continuously, okay? So you follow your data. You might have to test things that are under regulation, right? So you're just forced to test these things, PCI DSS, etc. You just have to test these networks. What I like to test is third-party services that we usually consume, because it's my data on somebody else's computer. And we have the most fun doing that. There's a lot of third-party services out there. And what they've actually done is just taken an on-prem application and stuck it on the cloud and called it a SaaS solution. When it typically isn't. It's an on-prem application that's been dumped in AWS. And that's it. So be careful of those ones. When we talk about retest or frequency of retest, again, it depends, right? And it depends what you define as a major change. But I would retest, based on your risk-based approach, any system, service that has any major change, okay? Again, whatever your regulation mandates, your retest frequency. And I don't know what stuff is really important, but you know your business, you know your organization, you know the stuff that you should be testing all the time, right? But there's a reality that this retest frequency is constrained by budget and the ability for you to actually retest important stuff. And important stuff is really hard to retest all the time because it's important. And every time you test it, you could break it. So there's a balance there. You need to strike a balance, okay? Typically, I wouldn't test something that's critical more than 2 times a year, because it probably takes you about a month or 2 months to get that change approval or for that test to commence. It probably takes you about a month or 2 to fix all those things. So you're looking at about 4 months anyway, end to end, and then you have to restart it again. So it's not that easy. So vendors, we got a lot of vendors out there, right? There are so many pen test companies. Did you know that, when you look at vendors, any vendor can say it's a pen test company, and any vendor can fill in a form and be CREST approved just as long as they pay their fee. So you got a bit more research on vendors out there, right? A lot of people say, "Oh, we're CREST approved." I would look a bit deeper than just being CREST approved, because it doesn't really mean much. Okay, if the tester himself is CREST approved, that's slightly different if he has the actual certifications. But vendors being CREST approved, it's a form you fill in and you pay a fee. So just be careful. Obviously, there's other standards, certifications that vendors can adhere to in other countries. So you might have a CREST equivalent in another country. So the biggest problem, like I said, it is hard to differentiate between the good pen testing companies and the bad pen testing companies. But I would look at CREST check CBEST, okay? CBEST, if you're on a CBEST, probably okay. If you get... So CBEST, I can't remember what it stands for, but essentially it's by the Bank of England. So they created this program for, it's really a scenario-driven pen test that everybody in the FCA, in the inner circle of the FCA, top 30 tier 1 banks would do this program, and it usually takes about 3 to 6 months with Intel, Recon, all the way through to asset compromise, etc. So it's a kind of black box approach and a scenario-driven approach. Very good, very long, very expensive, very, very expensive. So the only people that can do the CBEST tests are the people in CBEST, essentially. You wouldn't... The only reason why I mentioned CBEST, it's got a good list of penetration testing vendors in there. But you do have some really small niche boutique firms, okay? They are good. So when selecting, I would look at these things here. So do they have presence in other countries? Because Schroders, we have 38 different satellite offices, should I say. And I would like to partner up with a vendor that has presence in EMEA, APAC, Americas, etc., etc. So I don't want to have 38 different vendors. So it makes sense for me to get people that can cover those sites. Some things you can do remote, but sometimes you actually do need to, like Zurich, Swiss, you need somebody to be there. They're not going to do that remotely. You want to make sure that there are what the penalties are for changes or cancellations. You're going to do this a lot, right? You're going to schedule a pen test. You're going to speak to the project owner, the service owner, the business owner. You say, right, they're going to force you to say, we want a pen test to go live. You're going to get it all in. And a week before, they're going to say, we're not ready. And the pen test vendor say, well, I've scheduled my pen test on that week. And I've got 2 testers ready for you. And I'm not taking any work. So you've lost 20 grand. So be careful to manage your expectations. Say it up front to the product and service owner. You do realize you have to cancel this for 4 weeks. If you do cancel last minute, the product owner is going to pay the bill, not InfoSec. So you make better friends like that. I would always meet them in person and always get a technical person to come, not sales or pre-sales. Get one of their pen testers to join. Get somebody in your SOC team to join, just to go over what they do, their methodology, etc., etc. Very, very important. And there are things that take a lot of time and you must do. Your master service agreement, your non-disclosure agreement, your due diligence, and also agree on our rules of engagement, right? A lot of people don't have a rules of engagement. That is important. What do they do when they find porn on someone's share file? What do they do if they find somebody in your network? What do they do if they find clients access to other clients' data when they're testing a third-party service? Those are scenarios that happen, right? And you need to know what to do when that happens. This stuff takes a long time, so don't think that you're going to interview or onboard a vendor. You're going to speak to them 1 week and you're going to get them in the month after. It takes a long time to do this stuff. Your own operations team and your onboarding and your you know, your payments team and your legal team, they'll take ages to get these guys in. Well, if you're Schroders, they do. But one thing we always come against is indemnity insurance limits. And when you're dealing with boutique pen testing companies, they usually have a very small insurance payout, you know, an indemnity. And it kind of doesn't work with us. So most people probably just have like $1 million indemnity, where really, if you look for a large tier 1 bank, you're looking about 30 million plus if something happens. So they might need to go out and increase their insurance. And that also sometimes discounts those boutique firms. So you need to strike a balance if it's worth dealing with them. Yeah. It's just the legal team are not going to let you do that unless you take that responsibility. That's one you've got to be careful of. And a lot of people actually ask that. And if you have a really, really good pen test vendor that someone's recommended, and they're great and everybody uses them, chances are they have no time to do any pen tests for you. Right? So it's great that you have, you know, the world's best pen testing vendor, but unless you schedule them 1 year in advance, they're not going to help you. So again, be careful who you choose to work with. But most importantly, when it comes to vendors, is actually the consultants themselves, the testers themselves. Okay, so you need, I would look for guys that have stuff like OSCP. They have like the CREST, the CTFs. I would ask the guys, well, how many pen testing experience in terms of hours and engagements? And in CBEST, you need about 10,000 hours of pen testing experience. Okay, you need to have at least one tester that's done that, or two. I can't remember, but at least one person has to have done 10,000 hours of pen testing and maybe 50 engagements. So now you're talking about really well-seasoned, you know, pen testers. And how many testers do they actually have working for them directly? Most pen test companies don't have that much, actually. Handful, okay? 10, 20, 30 max. Some of the big boys have 60. That's about it. But most of them, it's around 10 to 30. And of those, how many are actually the ninjas that we're looking for, right? The really good guys, you know. Not many of them around. And also, you might have to align them with what you're looking for, right? Because if you're a company that wants to do a lot of testing with hardware, you need to make sure that they actually can do the hardware testing. Or you have a lot of mobile applications, to make sure they're ninjas, they have mobile application security ninjas. So guys that have constantly specialized in testing mobile applications. Because pen testers are different. You have different skills, different talents, right? Come in different shapes and forms and sizes. And also, some vendors cater for different industries. So there's some companies out there, they purely work in the financial industry. They understand payment systems very well. Or some people might understand maritime hardware and they don't know anything else. Or some people just know SCADA systems, etc. So you've got to make sure that they're aligned to your industry. So you're not getting somebody who just pen tests SCADA systems and now you've asking him to review your payment system. You don't want to pay a pen tester to learn on your job. Yeah, so you want that experience. And to really find out how good they are, you want to find out how they are active in the community. So I asked the two questions. Have you submitted any CVEs? Any exploits? Okay, and have you created any tools? If they haven't done either, they're either not sharing anything, which is not really nice, or they're not that good. Maybe. But I would like to have testers that have actually submitted some CVEs and actually created some tools, because I know then they can create some tools on the spot and they have a good development background. Goes without saying you maintain a relationship, and I wouldn't maintain more than 5 vendors on your list, because it just becomes very, very difficult. It's just too much to do, to be honest. But catch up every quarter, and as you roll out the engagements with all the different vendors, make sure you know the testers, because the testers jump around from one company to the other. Yeah, so it's actually not the vendor, it's the tester that you want to follow around. And again, there's not many ninjas, so you slowly start to recognize all the different ninjas that go around from one company to the other. Okay, and of course, rotate the vendors. Don't use the same vendor to test the same application. Maybe the other guys have a different methodology that's better and that captures different things. So talk about a bit about scope. So scoping is an interesting one, and it's very difficult, if I'm completely honest. But you should involve a pen tester, the pen tester PM or the security consultant, the service owner, a solutions architect or a security architect, developer, and somebody from the security engineering team. Together, collectively, you should agree on a good scope, okay? Because once you land on the site, you're going to identify your key targets, and you should get some service design documentation, okay? You should expect to get an overview of the service, a high-level architecture, breakdown of the key components, maybe some authentication sequence diagrams, maybe a network topology, data flow diagrams, etc. The list is endless. The more the better, okay? Because I take it from a clear box, white box approach, so share as much information as possible so the tester isn't wasting his time trying to figure stuff out, because you're limited on time, and you're just going to pay for it, basically, if you don't share these things.
What happens if they don't have all of these?
Don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. Pause the engagement and tell the service owner to get something on paper, because this happens all the time. And it's a good question, because that is typically what happens in nearly half of the pen test engagements. We're ready to pen test. Okay, what does it look like? Look in our source code repo. No. What does the service look like? Do you have HLD? High-level design. Do you have an LLD or detailed design? And typically it doesn't exist, because we're agile now, we're developing very fast, and they are developing without designing. So then when the pen tester comes and says, what am I testing? I'm like, oh, we'll tell you. What are you going to tell me? So you start to whiteboard it in the middle of the scope, and that is wasting time again. And pen tester companies are not going to want to give you a pen tester for days on end, right? They're going to say, okay, when you're ready, let us know. We'll come in and we'll talk about the scope. You don't use them to build your scope. You use them to talk about your scope, yeah? So yeah, so your question, absolutely right. Just tell them to go away, come back when they're ready, because they're obviously not ready. So I'm not going to diagram some threat modeling, but you need to do some threat modeling. There's about 12 different types of threat models out there. I've highlighted some: Stride, Pasta, attack trees. You can use your own threat model. All you're trying to do is be clear on what you're worried about and what your target is, essentially. Don't go crazy on this, yeah? Honestly, don't say that the Russian government are going through some packet that's gonna auto destruct my firewall and open up rules, and then it's not gonna happen, and you're not gonna stop nation state activity. Let's just be clear here, right? So don't go too crazy. All you're going to do is waste your money and waste your time. And try not to restrict the tester too much, yeah? He's doing a job for you. You really don't want to be the security bad cop here. You just want to let the tester run free. You've given him the permission to test, so let him test, okay? If you don't, again, you're wasting your time. But define your boundaries. Make sure you do that. So this is out of bound. Do not touch this, okay? And if you are going to touch, if you need to, please let me know. So just define what's out of scope. So duration, again, it depends. If it's black box, white box, if it's red team, blue team, that's what makes that's what tells you what duration is best. But it goes without saying, with limited time, you're only going to start finding the obvious stuff, right? If you have long time, you allow the pen tester to get creative. It's simple as. So, you choose. But on average, engagements last between 5 to 10 days. And typically, the stuff that you would find easily, you're going to find them the first 2-3 days. When you start to go past 10 days, you're finding stuff that's really hard to find. But a pen tester would typically break into your network in the first half an hour. If you're really good, 2 days. If you're really, really good, you probably need 10, 20, 30 days. But there's always ways to get around. So it depends how much prep you've done. So the question is always, who pays? Who pays for the pen tests? So my experience, if it's an annual pen test, CISO pays for it, okay? All our core services, core systems, external perimeter stuff, CISO pays. New service, major changes, service owner. If you've got a third-party service that they say, hey, please use us to do X, Y, and Z, well, you ask them to do a pen test, and they'll say to you, we've already done a pen test. And they'll share the results, and we'll Will we speak about those? Or might speak about those. Okay. This one gets a lot of people, which is where do you do your testing, right? So there are a lot of vendors out there, and there are a lot of them have remote pen testers, and a lot of pen testers like to sit in their shorts and at home and hack stuff from their bedroom. And that's the reality. You like to sit down and just be in your own zone, in your own environment. And a lot of people don't like to travel these days, right? Do more work, etc. I would only do that if you have a good relationship with the vendor and you know the pen tester, you've dealt with them before. And really, if you don't need that communication, so it's really just an external facing service, that's okay, you can test it from wherever. But if it's internal again, most of the time I would prefer that they at least come in for the first couple of days. They get acquainted with the service owner, they meet the team, they meet the SOC team, etc. Because there's a certain value in face-to-face conversations, there's a certain value in having the tester right next. You can ask you a question, you can ask him, you can solve things much faster. So I definitely would say if it's a new engagement with a new vendor, I wouldn't do any remote testing. Force them, you're going to do it on-prem, but we build a relationship, etc. Yeah, and if they are, your regulars, let them do a day, make sure everything's working, their access, everything is there, and then if they need to work remotely, so be it. Some high secure environments will not let you work remotely, obviously. So if you are in that kind of environment, it's impossible to do it remotely anyway, especially internal stuff. And remote testing usually for long, lengthy engagements. So, because most pen test vendors, they will charge you for hotel accommodation and et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to add that on top of the cost of the pen test engagement itself. So what you should look for in a pen test report. So you're looking for an exec summary, a detailed technical report, very important. Don't just accept just a fluffy, glossy PDF with a couple of pie charts, pies and bar charts, etc. That doesn't really mean anything. Let me know what you've done, what tools you've used, the methods, the evidence. Explain to me what the remediation is. Explain to me, use an industry standard criticality rating. What really bugs me is when you get some immature pen test vendors that have their own criticality rating. They make it up. So you take that criticality rating to the business. They go, how did you make that up? And they go, well, we think because it's this, it becomes that. And it's like, based on what? So don't fall for that. Also, when you have a findings management system which you want to track your findings, you want to be able to evaluate and prioritize, and you're only going to do that if you have an equal standard of how you rate your findings, right? So criticality is important. CVSS, always.
Are you expecting a fixed price for the engagement, or is it the daily? Are you paying for them?
This has come with the engagement. It's fixed price engagement. Very little T&M when it comes to pen testing. You say 10, 12, 13 days, whatever it might be. They'll say 1 day scope. They may say 1 day report writing, and they'll say 6 days execution, etc., etc. But a prerequisite is that you give me a detailed report, an exec summary, and I want to have an export of all the findings, an XML, CSV, whatever it might be, so that I can track them without the fluff. Yeah, and don't pay for the Q&A. I didn't ask if there was any vendors in here, but don't pay for the Q&A, because I don't see why I should pay for a vendor to Q&A its report. And a lot of vendors try to charge you for a Q&A of its own report. So don't pay. Don't say I said that. Preparation, very important. Make sure you do as much as you can to not let them in. So I would try to do every single line item there. Okay? So a security architecture review. Security by design, make sure it's designed. It's been engineered to be secure. It has defense. It is defensible, right? Make sure you've done your compliance scans, right? You've followed some SYS standard of some sort. You've done your vulnerability scanning. You've done your dynamic code analysis. You've done your static code analysis. You've done all the scanning. You don't want a pen tester to turn up and tell you, hey, you've missing this patch, or your code has got this vulnerability, or you got this SQL injection. You should have seen that in your static code analysis, right? So get all that easy stuff out of the way. That's the low-hanging fruit.
This one is not pen testing, right? The internal testing is not pen testing.
Correct. So the gentleman's asked if this is not pen testing. Absolutely correct. This is just part of internal testing. So I wouldn't pay a pen tester to do compliance scanning, vulnerability scanning, static code analysis. I will get him to validate that all of these things have been done by saying, okay, we've said that we've met all these requirements, so the code is great. We've remediated all the code vulnerabilities. So I'd give him the code. I'll give him the source code, and hopefully he will not find any weakness in the code. So he could do a code review for sure, but only after you've done a static code analysis. Yeah.
Manager, let's say as a CISO, decide to get an internal pen tester to actually probe the asset and come up with the report that okay, we need to carry out the remediation, we need to fix this and fix them before outsourcing it to the third party, which is the vendor, to actually come in to carry out the penetration testing. Is that cost effective?
Yeah, because this stuff can all be automated. Remember, you can find open source tools for any of these things, right? So you shouldn't, you don't need an internal pen tester to do this stuff. Any security engineer should be able to run these, okay? And actually, there's no reason why the developer himself is not going to run the static code analysis himself, because good code is secure code, okay? It's as simple as that. So open source code analysis, the libraries, you can get open source tools to say, hey, this library has a vulnerability. The developer should know that he's using a library with a vulnerability. Upgrade the version or use another library. Compliance scan. You're just going to follow a SYS standard. So many free tools out there to check your Windows image and see, and it will tell you, Microsoft free tools, best practice analyzers, you're not doing this, and X, Y, and Z. So I would try and do all of these yourself and not to pay anybody to do these. You'll save money. So this is basically how easy is it? Sorry, the question is, do you publish versions of assets, digitally facing assets, essentially, right? So if you're running IAS, Tomcat, etc., should you try to somehow remove the version? Yes, why not? I mean, it's security by obscurity, but why not? Do that, of course. It just makes it a little bit slows the attack down a little bit more, but no big deal. It's a quick win. Okay, so I would do that, but I wouldn't. It doesn't mean too much, actually. If you know you're running a version that's vulnerable, and you're removing the version so that somebody somehow doesn't realize that you're running a vulnerable version, yeah, that's security by obscurity. That's not a good approach. I love this because this is what always happens. So coming back again, you're just about to do a pen test. You've scheduled it, everything's ready, and then development seems like just one more change, okay? Or, they say, oh, on the day of the pen test, because they get nervous and they know that they haven't done their best to secure this application, they just want to submit some last-minute changes. Don't do that. They're obviously not ready. So don't waste your money. Make sure you confirm all changes, and make sure you confirm them weeks in advance so that you can assure them that if they cancel it the same day or 2 days before, 3 days before, they are going to pay the penalty. And if they're happy to pay the penalty, then it's fine. One mistake people make all the time is they test UAT instances that are not the same as the production instances. No matter what the developer says, unless you have a solid CI/CD platform pipeline, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and you know it's released as code and it goes from one environment to and upgraded to another environment, programmatically, it's highly likely that the UAT version does not look like the production version. So I would always aim to test a production instance. And my second choice is always UAT. So also align the internal resources, the service owner resources, to the pen tester as well, so that if the pen tester has any questions during the pen test, he can speak to the developer himself or herself. So make sure that happens, because again, you get more value out of the pen test if they can actually reach out to the person that's made the thing, because he can explain to him why he made that decision to encode rather than encrypt or etc. So your absolute your pre-flight check would be comms, right? Communication is very important. Service owner, service management, application guys, infrastructure leads. You have your little list of people that you should be communicating that there are pen tests is about to happen. Because if you don't, and you do cause a P1 again, you probably will sometimes. Again, experience. And the guys are going to scream and shout at you and say, "Hold up a minute. We see all of these accounts being locked out. We saw this activity. What's happening?" And you go, "Oh, we're running a pen test." And they say, "Why didn't you tell us?" And you say, "Didn't think I had to." Yeah, you don't make any friends doing that. So please make sure you communicate. Let everybody know so that they don't slow down your tester. And also, if you do have a situation where a pen tester breaks something, you can respond immediately, and people don't panic and think it's a hacker and the whole world's on fire, etc., etc. So just yeah. And a simple one: if you don't want to spend £1,000 a day, which you will do if you don't get your pen tester's account sorted out, his access, his desk space, and his corp device. So yeah, if you have £1,000 a day to spare, don't bother doing that until the day he turns up, or maybe the second day. So, and that also is quite typical, because people say, "Yeah, I'm going to get pen tests." Yeah, it comes in. All right. Then you have to wait for somebody to provision the account, somebody to get the application account, and somebody to find the application resource, and somebody to tell him the URL, and etc., etc. So I have this in a framework, in a actual checklist, in a process. So I have a big process that goes right. And my last slide is about other things you need to think about, which is included there. So all of this stuff that I've spoken about, you should have it in a process and a workflow. You know what you're doing next, etc., etc. If not, you're going to forget this stuff, because we're talking about 9 different sections, and we can deep dive in every single one of these things that need to be done, and how it should be done, and when it should be done, etc. So you should have your little workflow and your little schedule and your tasks, your checklist, everything we spoke about. So yeah.
If you're going to do penetration testing on the lab system, sure, it's going to impact the service level.
If it's a new service, and it's a new service in production, it won't impact anybody, because sure. But when we talk about pen testing, typically we don't do like load testing or soak testing. It's just actually logic flaws, etc. So I wouldn't do any distributed denial of service attacks at all. So I don't see a problem with the performance. When I did used to work in Transport for London, and we used to test like the wireless and the tube, and we used to test the dot matrix displays and the tube platforms. And when we used to do some tests, some things used to drop. My argument was, that's not my issue, because if all I have to do is send a packet to knock an application over, then there's obviously something wrong with that application. And I'm talking about the DOS attack. I'm just talking about sending certain packets crafted in a certain way that caused this to fail. So actually, I've actually identified an issue for you. So I would think it would be better to know that your application will fall over when I do a test. So that's my argument there. But you choose your battles, right? So I personally would go down that road every time.
During
Well, what is that? I mean, so this kind of says to me that an adversary says, right, they're not busy now, so I'm gonna try to hack them at this time. It's nonsensical. Like, I mean, it's your judgment call. It's a risk call, right? But for me, I want to make it as realistic as possible, as close to the reality as possible, because then you're getting real value, right? So, yeah, I'm a risk taker, so that's what I like to do. But your company may not have the risk appetite, so it's down to you know, an agreement. But I personally like to test production instances, especially if they're external. So we're going to go to execution, just talk a bit about it. So in flight, there's a lot of very important things, and I've repeated that word, very important. But maintain direct communication with your pen tester, right? So don't just stick him in a room and just let him do his thing, yeah? Keep checking on him, huh? Make sure he's got what he needs, he's doing the right thing, make sure he's going in the right direction. Unblock the pen tester if he gets blocked, okay? Don't try and go, haha, you can't get past that. All he needs is time. Again, if you have £10,000 in 10 days, so be it. Waste that 10 days and 10,000. But if he tells you, hey, I can crack this, or I can get past this, I just need 2 days or half a day, forget about it. Give him the access. Keep it moving, right? Because that's not the point. The point is he's already proved to you, he's already shown you that he could potentially crack this, get past this. So don't waste the time on this whole obscurity bit. Just say, okay, cool. Then we'll let you get to the next phase, and we'll assume that you could have done that. But, you know, don't let him get past everything. Don't change the scope of the pen test, please, in the middle. It just gets things all confused, and the service owners don't like it. And you're changing the goalposts, and you're going to get all sorts of arguments with the business of why you did this when you weren't supposed to, and we weren't prepared, and that element or product or component wasn't ready, and that's why you found problems. So be clear, stay on target with the scope. Don't also fix in flight. Don't fix anything in flight, unless it's a major finding, of course. But typically, don't fix stuff in flight, so you can show the evidence. You can show, because when you're fixing stuff, you just it's tactical, and you don't look at the cause. You're just fixing symptoms. Not really great way to fix things in flight, especially if they're not major findings. And every single thing that the pen tester has done, make sure that he captures evidence, screenshots, dumps, etc. Very, very important. How are we doing on time? Okay. So nearly to the end. So daily debrief, very important. End of the day, have a call with the pen tester. Get your pen tester PM, your service owner, and your SOC lead. Get them all on a call. Give you an overview of what's happened, what his findings are, and you want to escalate any major findings, of course. And you want to also speak to your SOC team, see have they seen it, have they not? If they did see it, did they identify it as malicious? Very important. They might have seen it, but not identified it as malicious. Okay, it's very, very important. Post-execution. So I've gone quite fast over the execution because it depends what you're doing, right? But those are the main things. Make sure you have your daily debrief. You'll find loads of stuff and you'll finish. But really the real work starts after the pen test is complete. So a lot of people don't do this, but I encourage you to do this. Ask your vendor to review you. Give you feedback on you. So how could you improve the engagement? Okay? What did you guys do wrong? Maybe they say, well, we wasted a lot of time because you weren't ready, etc., etc. So ask for some feedback back from the vendor. And then you can also give them your feedback. You thought the pen tester was rubbish, or you thought it was great. The report was slow. It was very, they didn't attend the daily debriefs, etc., whatever it might be. Ask for an encrypted report, and review the report carefully, because that report could end up at board level. So make sure you are 100% clear on the remediation, the findings, you agree with the criticality rating, because you're going to see the results, right? And the results are always great. I love the results. That is always the face I get from the service owners. I know. um, so, okay. So, like I said, make sure you agree with the remediation steps, right? Because the pen testers, again, might go wild and crazy and say, hey, we think you should put multi-factor authentication. We think you put a firewall in front of this, and you should block this, put a WAF, put this, put that. And you yourself as security go, hold up a minute. No, actually, I don't think we need to do all those things. So make sure you agree with the remediation, because you might be on side with the actual service owner and say, actually, that's unnecessary. You know, the draft report. Remember, although they follow maybe CVSS rating, they don't really understand the risk appetite of the organization. So it might be a critical finding, but for the organization, it might not be, because it doesn't take into consideration the risk appetite. But whatever you do, don't sit on the report, right? Because when you find out all these companies that have been breached, and they own up to saying, yeah, we knew that, we did a pen test 6 months ago, and we just didn't fix it. So again, you're going to do it, make sure you fix it, right? Very important. But also, be careful who you share the pen test report with first. And I'll elaborate on that a bit. Let's say that you share the pen test with the PM, the pen test PM, and the pen test PM shared it with the service owner, and the service owner shared it with group risk, and group risk shared it with the board, and the board asked the CTO, why is this service runnable? What do you think the CTO is going to say? He's going to be caught with his pants down because he doesn't know about it, and it's his estate. You're not going to make friends like that, so make sure it doesn't, because these things, they spread like wildfire. So be careful who you let know what the results and findings are. Very important. I've had experience on this. Don't want to be in there. Bad.
Yeah, why would the asset owner share the report with the exec team? I think there's supposed to be two reports when it comes to pen testing, which is the exec
Yes.
technical report. So I believe the technical report goes to the asset owner for the remediation to the action, while the exec report goes to the exec team.
So the question is, the exec report should go to the exec team, and why is that an issue? Yeah. Then.
Basically, you said the report
Yes.
would go to the asset owner, and from the asset owner it would go to the exec.
Sure. Okay. Sure. Let me make it clear. You're right. Exec report or exec summary can go to the execs, and the technical report can go to the information security. That's not my point. My point is, make sure the CTO, whoever is responsible for the system, gets to see the report before somebody from the board or above him sees it before him and asks him, why is this runnable? So that's the most important thing. And that happens because the CTO doesn't see everything, but just make sure you let the right people know first, because you might find yourself out of a job real quick. And it's obviously people just want to do the right thing here, but you don't want your group risk speaking to your CTO and go, hey, you got this runnable system. Did you know about it? And he goes, no. Why? Because one of the CTO's guys has actually accidentally leaked it to somebody who does not in his reporting line. But we can talk about that after. And I'm just this is my golden nugget. I'm talking from experience here. Pain. So have a wash up with the service owner. Have a wash up with the blue team. Make sure they map the findings to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. If you haven't looked at that, please look at that. That's really good, because then you can see how they got in and how they moved through the network laterally, and what controls failed, etc., and what methods were used. And then next time you can block those methods, so you can start looking at all the tools and techniques. And also help the guys understand the results, right? The service owners. Explain to them, if you need to, in the layman terms, what the findings mean and what the impact is, because they might not know actually. So the remediation, a lot of fun, okay, is between basically the security team and the service owner wanting to go live. Is who is going to get over the line first, right? And you don't want to be there. What you really want is for the service owner to come to you and say, hey, do you think it's okay for us to go live with these findings? So I would focus on the causal symptoms. And typically, they are always down to poor coding practice, lack of security controls, misconfiguration, lack of visibility from the SOC because they couldn't stop him in time, and There's a lot of hard-coded credentials going around these days, even in GitHub, public. Focus on the highs and mediums, it's obvious. If you have the energy and the time, do the lows and informational. But don't overlook the lows and informational, because the lows might be very important, by the way. So it might be classified as low, but remember, you could have something with high impact, the likelihood is very low, and it could be rated as low, based on CVSS scoring. So you might want to actually do some lows. So don't discount them. If you've applied a patch plaster to the finding, then your pen tester is probably going to find it again. So apply it properly, but it's down to you if you want to use a pen tester to retest after remediation. It depends how big the work was. If it was a quick fix, you don't really need it. It's very clear how to stop it. But if you have to change masses of code, lines of code to make this change, then you really want to get pen test again, because you might have been just doing a tactical fix on the problem, the symptom, not the cause. So it's the last slide. So we're going back to the XML export. I don't know who asked the question about exporting findings. I think somebody did. So I would consider a findings management system. So you can put all your pen test results, your vulnerability scans, all your findings in a findings management system. So in the future you can go, right, this payment system was reviewed, I don't know, 6 months ago or 3 times last year, and here are the vulnerability scan results, and here are the static code analysis results, and now you can have all of these results aligned to those IP addresses involved, etc. Really, really great. Incident management, you want to think about that, how you handle incident caused by the pen tester, or the pen tester finding another pen tester in your network. That does happen as well. Because once you're finding him, you will find somebody else, if you're unlucky. Findings, ratings versus risk tolerance. That's also important. Like I said, criticality rating might differ. Think about your risk acceptance process. Your ninja tracking. Your ninja tracking for me is probably very important. Whenever you do an engagement, get the details of that ninja, because you want to make sure you ask for him again. And every time you do a quarterly catch-up, ask if that ninja still works for them, because he's probably gone to the competitor because he's a ninja. Then you start tracking your ninjas across all the vendors, etc. It's very, very important. Think about automating your pen test management process. So we asked about, sorry, Suzanne, you asked about the whole process. Think about automating it in ServiceNow workflow. I do this, I do that, I do that. And also think about scheduling your pen tests in advance, get the best rates, get the best guys, etc. That's it for me. Hope you enjoyed it. Those are my contact details. And do we have any time for questions? Or are we well over? Okay, so we have some time for questions. Cool. Yeah.
So those obviously come at a cost. You mentioned quite a lot about the expense, a lot of what we're talking about. So if you're a smaller organisation with lower budget, what would your advice be?
I would not get an internal pen tester.
No, but I'm saying if you haven't got the budget to pay for all these things.
Okay.
So smaller organisations have a smaller budget by definition. So how would you approach, I don't want to go through the whole...
Sure. So if you're a small organization, I'm hoping that means you have a small digital footprint and you have a lower number of digital assets to test, etc. You're going to win by using open source tools and automating the hell out of everything. So, and doing all of the free things that you can do, what we spoke about. Making sure you got all your patching, make sure you've done your static code analysis, all those things that you can do yourself, do them. And when it comes to pen testing, you really need to take a risk-based decision on what you pen test, right? It's down to you. What is really important to you? Is it the external stuff, or is it, maybe some external stuff you don't really care about? So what if somebody defaced your website? You don't really care. You don't want to spend your money on that. What you care about is one database that has all your financial details about all your clients. You want that to be super secure. It's not external facing. Let's face it. TalkTalk, for example, when they were hacked, they weren't. What was targeted was a very non-critical service that was external facing. Okay, and through that they got into an internal critical asset and assets. So sometimes you got to think about it. It's not. You have to assume compromise, right? and then you need to like follow your data. So if you're a small organization, think about what's most important to you. Typically, it's your data or your IP is, and just focus on that. You just don't have the budget to test everything, but you can leverage automatic pen testing tools. There's a lot of stuff out there, you know. And if you are a small organization, treat your vendors as an extension of your department, okay? So maintain a very good relationship with a very small number of pen test vendors. So I wouldn't then go to 5, I would have maybe 2. And I'd maintain a very good relationship and be very open with them. And essentially you're dealing with people here. So if you have a good relationship, those guys will do you favors, you'll get some stuff for free, you know, they'll help you out, they'll give you a bit of advice. It's also advice, you know, even when it says, okay, we found these things, just to let you know, if you go out and test them, we don't need to test them, we already know, you know, they give you a bit of advice. Also look at all of the, you know, the guidance out there, NIST controls, etc. If you actually follow all of that and have a good patching regime and you do all these internal tests, you'll be okay-ish. Yeah, it is a hard question to answer. Okay. Sorry, sorry.
You mentioned about the availability of different methodologies.
Yes.
Now, is there one which is more popular? I guess we don't have a British standard for penetration testing.
No. Yes, you don't.
We have.
No, you don't. There isn't.
So, do we need to ask the external company who is doing the pen testing, what methodology are you using?
Yes, but they'll all be different. But hopefully, if they follow CREST, there is a methodology so all CREST-approved vendors have a methodology, and also, if they follow the MITRE ATT&CK framework, it should be all well aligned, right? So, ask what methodology, and hopefully they follow the CREST methodology. But actually, pen testing or penetration testing, there is no such thing as a standard of how to do penetration testing. I found this out a good few years ago. I think there should be. I'm working on one, and this is actually forms a framework that I'm trying to write in a mini kind of pamphlet, tiny book on penetration testing and how we should do it, etc. But there isn't something currently out there. Cool. Sorry, one question in the back first. So are you? Is your question that we're developing and building more and more? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, as you get more and more, as you use more and more services that are hosted in other people's computers, how are you protecting your data, right? Essentially. So, sure. So for me, now we start to talk about the identity-centric model versus the network-centric model and whole zero trust model approach. So in the new world of cloud and everything's going to, so essentially in the new world where you're putting your data on everyone else's computer, you need to have some assurance that your data is secure, and you need to have some assurance that your authentication and authorization is strong. Okay, that's a big topic, but what I would say is that you need to forget about a kind of network-centric approach and more of a strong identity-centric approach, right? And a lot of companies are struggling with this new advent of borderless systems, borderless networks, you know, services out there that have no network-centric controls because they assume that you have a very strong identity-centric. Like, for example, but what I would say is don't let the service provider or the services deal with your authentication and authorization. Do federation, okay? So if you want to use someone's service, say I would like to do SAML federation, for example. So I want to say, I don't want my users to use your credential, to store my credentials in your database, in your identity provider. I want you to redirect the authentication to us, for example. You're never in line of the authentication and authorization, so it's just passing tokens around. So that's one aspect from securing the authentication authorization. In terms of the data security, there's a lot to be said about that. That's what I said in one of the slides. I like to pen test third-party services, and I like them to tell me what services, what pen tests they have done on the services they're providing, and you typically find that they've not done much. So again, risk-based decision. If you want to use a SaaS service, you're essentially putting all of that responsibility onto them. Hopefully, the contract with them will protect you, and they will defend to make sure that their services are secure and safe and all of that lovely stuff. But again, it depends on your size. If you're very small, you just get what you're given. If you're a very large company, you have the clout to say, show me how you've secured your service so that I can put my data in your service. But we can talk about this in more detail after, if you want. Hopefully that's answered some of your questions. You can do pen testing in non-production environments, and a lot of people do that. I would only do it if you can guarantee that what you've tested in the UAT environment is exactly what is going to be pushed into the production environment. So if you have a strong deployment methodology and a strong pipeline to production, and it's very clear that literally it's user acceptance testing, so everything here is actually deployed now into production, then of course, by all means, you can do production instance. So you have a guarantee that whatever is production is in UAT. I can assure you that unless you're a very mature company, you have a proper CI/CD pipeline, you have a clear path to production, you are not going to have the exact configuration in production and UAT. You know, most of the time it isn't the same. There'll be some tweaks that somebody's done and they've not committed it to the production instance or whatever. It's always behind, like, you know, a version or 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks because nobody wants to touch the production instance. They're making changes on the UAT instance because that's what it's for. And you shouldn't be scared to test the production instance, is my point. What are you scared of? If you guarantee that you're not going to bring down the service, you're not going to do a load test, you're going to, you know, perform a denial of service attack, what are you scared of? Especially if it's external facing. You know? Just put a change control in if it's internal facing. We're going to test it on this day. Done. Production.